Okay, so welcome to this webinar called Ignite Your Self-Pleasure. And this is the first in a series of live webinars that I'm going to be offering. And I'm really delighted that 47 women have signed up for this. So if you're here live, lovely to have you here. And if you're getting the recording, I really hope you enjoy watching this. And I'm Sarah Rose Bright. I'm a sex, pleasure and intimacy coach, and I work with all sorts of people, individuals, people in relationship, to help them to really to tap into their body wisdom, to find their authentic sexual expression, and really to, with that, a lot of it also about sort of, for me, is around self-love, really getting to know and love who you are. Welcome, Claire. And also just really charging up your life, because when we really embrace and connect with this area of our lives, it really reaps benefits in so many aspects of our lives. So often we just feel better, we feel more connected, we feel more healthy, vibrant, more alive, more passionate, all sorts of different spin-offs. So I'm really passionate, as you can see, about what I do. And self-pleasure particularly is one of the subjects that we cover. I run a 9-week course for women called Ignite the Erotic. And so partly as well tonight's a little bit of a taster of the many things that we're going to cover on the course as well. So self-pleasure, what we're going to do tonight is we're going to look at self-pleasure as a practice for learning, growth, discovery, exploration, self-love, confidence, pleasure. So we're going to look at the benefits of self-pleasure and how it's different to masturbation. We're going to look at the sexual anatomy of our bodies. We're going to look at the concept of erotic yoga, which I'll explain later. We're going to explore your erotic toolkit, so all the incredible tools that you can play with to really take your self-pleasure practice to a different level. And also we're going to look at some of the blocks and pitfalls that you can hit as well, because when we're practicing, when we're learning, inevitably we're going to have times when it feels challenging, frustrating, or we feel stuck. So it's really good to name that and explore that. So what I want to have you to leave with tonight is to leave with a real sense of possibility, of excitement, and some really clear things that you can take away and put into practice with straight away. And I'm going to send you like a checklist as well, some of the things that we spoke about tonight. So obviously please feel free to take notes, but I will send you some great stuff as well. So let's just take a moment just to take some nice deep breaths, because breath is fundamental in our pleasure. So if you want to close your eyes and maybe put your hand on your belly, or one hand on your belly, one hand on your heart, just to center yourself in your body. You may have been having a busy day, just come back from work, dealing with children, all sorts of different things. So it's just really good just to take a moment to really center yourself. And so I invite you to take we're going to take 3 really deep breaths. And on the exhale, to really make a sighing sound. It's a really great way to dispel, release tension, to relax the body, and just bring us more into into the present moment. So taking a deep breath, first of all, taking a nice deep breath into your heart. So breathing in. And on the out breath, letting go, relaxing. And then breathing into your belly. Feeling your belly as you inhale, and then the exhale. Just letting go, relaxing. And for this third breath, just intending your breath all the way down into your pelvis. So breathing in. Filling your pelvis, your pelvic bowl, and on the exhale, relaxing. And just noticing how you feel after taking just 2 or 3 breaths. Sometimes just that's all we need to shift our focus, shift our energy. So let's get started. So I want to talk about the benefits of self-pleasure. And first of all, really just to say a little bit about why I feel this is just such an important area for us to address, because often self-pleasure, it may be something you do, it may be something you don't do for all sorts of different reasons, or you don't do a lot. And self-pleasure is often, it's something we do, or it's the most consistent thing in our life on one level, and something we can do from quite a young age, where we can pick up habits and patterns very easily. And the habits and patterns that we pick up in self-pleasure and masturbation become very routine and become the basis of our sex life. Sometimes we're not conscious of this. And what I find is, when I've worked with people, and I've worked with people for many, many years now, is masturbation tends to be something that's very goal focused. So the intent is often to get to the goal of having an orgasm, or trying to have an orgasm as quickly as possible. And with that, and that can tend to be just the only practice. Masturbation can literally just be going for the goal every time. And there's nothing wrong with that. Actually, you might really enjoy that. However, and that's wonderful. However, it can become limiting. And also masturbation can come with a lot of baggage of history of the name, and shaming, feeling guilty, all sorts of different things. And so I like to reframe our solo practice as self-pleasure, because it's expanding it beyond the goal and seeing it as a place of discovering all about your pleasure. I'm going to talk about this a little bit more in a minute. And I talk about this. This is another webinar I'm going to do a topic on, called Performance to Pleasure, where we often learn to self-pleasure and to learn to have partnered sexual experiences, where the focus is on the goal. And when the focus is on the goal, it just sets us off on a narrow track of what's possible. And also lots of things happen to our nervous system, all sorts of different things, when we're focused on the goal, because it often becomes a very tension-based experience. The body goes into a lot of contraction with it. Again, it can feel great. However, if that's what we do all the time, it can become limiting. So I talk about the pleasure model of sex, where it's learning to hang out in pleasure, to really experience pleasure, whether it's if we had a pleasure scale of like 1 to 10, it doesn't matter if it's a 2 out of 10, 5 out of 10, 10 out of 10, that we just enjoy all pleasure as equal. We're not racing ahead trying to get to the goal of the intense pleasure. So we're going to talk a little bit about that a bit later. So I just want to set the context of this. We often learn our sexual experiences in the performance model, and they quickly become routine habits in the body that become imprinted. I bet there's a few of you on here that the quickest way to get yourself, if you have an orgasm, the quickest way to get there, and which is great. But again, it's that sometimes it trains our body out of experiencing other ways, and this is what I really love to teach people and share, is the experience of self-pleasure as becoming a practice to expand and explore. And for me, I've been on a whole journey with self-pleasure, and what I've experienced in self-pleasure is beyond anything I could ever have possibly imagined. And I've really studied this, practiced this for a number of years. So can really share this from not just my experience with my clients, but also from my own life experience as well. So just to set a little bit of cultural backdrop of this, I think, there's a real message that you need another person for your pleasure. That, sometimes people will say self-pleasure is something I do when I haven't got a partner. Self-pleasure is something when I self-pleasure, I feel sad, all these sorts of different things. And it's almost seen as less than partnered sex. And so I'd like to sort of bust that myth straight away and to stop comparing it. It's two different things. So, it's like going for a walk on your own, going for a walk with a partner or friend, two different things. So not to compare it, and to see it as something unique and special in its own right. And I think we also have a really strong message around our sexual pleasure, that we need others for our arousal, and that our arousal comes through external things. So it comes through our partners, it comes through thoughts, it comes through porn. And I find that so many people do not know how to arouse themselves. And it's so important that we have a healthy relationship with the erotic energy in our body through ourselves, and then we can share it with another. So I talk about the concept of like erotic self-sufficiency, that we are connected to our bodies, and we can build and generate our own sexual energy and arousal without external things and without thoughts and without fantasy. And that takes practice, and it's not about that the only way. Outside things are absolutely wonderful, but if we are always relying on the external, then we're going to have we're not going to have as fulfilling sexual experience. So it's how do we generate our arousal for ourselves? How do we really see our bodies as these incredible musical instruments that you're learning to play? And if we're just going for the goal of orgasm every time, it's like we're plucking the same string, and there's only so many songs we're going to be able to play. But if we really use this opportunity to explore and get to know ourselves, then we can play so much more, so many more songs. And then when we come together with another, then we're going to create a whole different suite of music than if we're just playing that one string. So I just want to talk about briefly why we might self-pleasure, because I feel, again, self-pleasure is seen as often a way of releasing tension, which absolutely can work very well. And it can be seen a way of experiencing pleasure, but I feel there's so much more to that. So my dear colleague, Sue Newsome, we sat down and we created this sort of this little map of why we might self-pleasure. And so I just want to share the 4 areas that we really identified. So first of all is pleasure. So simply just to enjoy pleasure, and the goal is pleasure. And that might just be to have some lovely pleasure because you've got a little bit of time, or it might be creating a whole session which is about deeply making love to yourself and really spending time with your whole body, and even having a date with yourself around this. When we do this and really engage with it for pleasure, when we really can take responsibility for our pleasure, and as we take responsibility for our pleasure, we then can leap out of the habits and the routines that we have and really learn to play this incredible musical instrument of our bodies. It also helps us to develop our sensitivity and our capacity for pleasure, because we all have like a ceiling of pleasure where that's the maximum we can experience. But actually with practice, that can expand and that can grow. That capacity can really, so for example, if you're shallow breathing and you're not breathing deeply and fully, that's going to limit the amount of pleasure that you're going to experience in your body. So we can explore different ways of experiencing pleasure, and it's like we're creating new neural networks, new pathways in the body, and also increasing the sensitivity, because a lot of times people share with me how they may be numb in different parts of the body, and as women particularly, our internal vaginas can be very numb and not have much sensation. So practices like self-pleasure, we can really explore and build our capacity for pleasure. So the second reason that we might self-pleasure is I feel like it's like our own inbuilt medicine cabinet. So literally, it can help with so many different ailments and feeling states. It can help with tiredness and help people get to sleep. It can help you have energy if you're feeling exhausted. It can help with period pains. Having some self-pleasure, having an orgasm can really help shift period pains, backache, headaches, all sorts of different things. And research shows that regular solo sex also builds the immune system, and it helps us to increase our general health and vitality. So, I feel that that we can explore, more of that actually, and use our bodies more consciously in this way. The third area is healing and transformation. And there's so many levels to this. This is the huge area that I feel that is never really talked about and is missed out on. But actually, this is where the real opportunity is. And in a way, all what I've mentioned is potential for healing and transformation. But I also feel that self-pleasure is our training ground. Like talked about the musical instrument. It's how we prepare ourselves as well for being sexual with another. If we learn about our body, we listen, we understand how our body responds, what arouses us. And of course, our experience when we're with another person is going to be different. Our arousal may be different, but we can still learn so much. With this, we build trust and confidence in how our body will respond to stimulation. So that's really important as well. Thank you for your message. Someone just said to me, can you slow down a little bit speaking? Because I'm saying such great stuff and they want to write it down. So I will do my best, but also remember you've got the recording. So, please feel free to listen to that as well, because I've got some great stuff I want to share. So there's quite a bit to pack in, and also want to have some time for questions and answers, but thank you for your comment. It also is an opportunity for continuing self-education, because our bodies are changing all the time. We might be having stages of life, for example, going into perimenopause or menopause. We might be just connecting with pleasure again after childbirth. We might be healing from, we might have a medical condition or a health condition. So our pleasure's changing, and it just changes day to day anyway. I mean, what I might like sexually today might be different to tomorrow. We're really fluid beings, and that's one of the things that we very easily get into habits with our pleasure. And having a self-pleasure practice really invites us to tune in and say, you know, what does my body want today? What's going on? How does my body want to be touched? What's my body saying yes for? So it gives us a really great tools that actually are super valid for the rest of our lives. You know, listening to your body wisdom, really trusting yourself, following the energy, your impulses, rather than coming from the mind. So, you know, I've found that as I deepen in my own personal practice, it really influences the rest of my life. Also, you know, if you're somebody who's got in patterns with your pleasure, for example, you know, hands up, this was me, total people pleaser, had no concept that my pleasure was valid. It was all about the other. So self-pleasure really taught me to listen to myself, to value myself and my body. Self-pleasure can also help with healing of sexual concerns. So, for example, if you have issues around body image, self-pleasure can help you connect. One example I'll give you is I work with a number of women who don't like their breasts for different reasons. It may be how their breasts have changed. It may be that they've got no sensation. It may be that they've changed shape, or all sorts of different reasons. And so they say to me, my breasts, I don't like my breasts, I don't feel anything. And so they shut off and they don't try. And that's understandable, but I encourage them to go and do some practice. And particularly for the women who don't like how they look, then they start to touch them and go, but actually they feel really nice. Or if they feel not a lot of sensitivity when they touch them, and they touch them regularly, the sensitivity starts to come back. So we can use our self-practice to heal our concerns, our worries. If we are not able to orgasm, for example, self-pleasure is a really great place to explore how that might be. If we are healing from trauma, and it can be a whole range of trauma, having a self-pleasure practice where we're really honoring our body, listening in, checking in, finding out where what's happening, and really deeply listening, helping ourselves to feel safe again through the practice. So much healing can happen there. Self-pleasure can also be used to release and clear emotional and mental states. So I talked a bit about how self-pleasure can be great, for example, if you've got a headache, backache. But actually, for example, you know, I've had times when I've been feeling really stressed. One of my heroines in the field, an amazing woman called Annie Sprinkle, she talks about having like an angergasm. You know, if you're feeling angry, take it to your self-pleasure practice and let it all out with an orgasm. And, you know, it's not that self-pleasure has to be pretty or perfect. It might be that you know, I've had it where I've cried through my self-pleasure practice, and it's been about releasing emotions. You can also use self-pleasure for you know, healing. If you're working with, for example, chakras, or you know, familiar with things like cutting cords, using your sexual energy can be so powerful in these instances. You can channel your orgasmic energy into the chakras that are feeling stuck or blocked or want healing, and it can be super powerful way to clear your own energy and to cleanse your energy field and to open up to more energy. And also using self-pleasure to visualize new possibilities for yourself. You know, it may be that you're not feeling confident sexually, but you can, in your self-pleasure practice, really imagine that, to visualize that. So there's lots that you can explore there as well. And then the final reason you might self-pleasure, and this isn't an exhaustive list, it's just a system that we came up with to help people to see the possibilities, is also about accessing different states of consciousness. So some people use self-pleasure as almost like a practice to get out of the everyday mind. So for example, I know that when I get into a deep self-pleasure practice and I get into full body orgasms, that it's like the most incredible blissful meditation for me. It's like my physical body can disappear and I'm just absolutely blissed out. And in those moments I can get such insights and such downloads and intuitions, and people use it to get into different trance states, all sorts of different things. So that's a whole other area to explore. So I hope that's just given you a little flavor of why. So and also giving you some get some excitement about what's possible. So next I would like to talk about our sexual anatomy. And I just want to say, so I feel that getting to know the sexual anatomy of our bodies is so important for enhancing our pleasure and our sensation and our sensitivity, and also enhancing our orgasms. But what I want to say is, you know, you may be listening and you've never had an orgasm. You may be listening and you've had orgasms. But I'm not... when I start working with people, I don't focus on orgasms. I find at the moment there's a lot of stuff out there on how to have G-spot orgasms, cervical orgasms, multiple orgasms. And actually the focus on that, whilst it's got its place and it's absolutely valid and absolutely great to explore, I find if we start there, then that becomes the goal and can become limiting. And it becomes something that people strive for and then feel that they have somehow sexually failed because they're not getting there. And so for me, which is rubbish, because you certainly haven't, you know, I think this can be a bit of from talking to people feeling, you know, or if I have clitoral orgasms only, then I'm not a fully sexual being because I'm not having vaginal orgasms and things. But actually that's, you know, that's just nonsense. We're all at different stages. We're all learning. We're all exploring. And what I feel is really important is how we spend time getting to know our bodies and our pleasure and enhancing our capacity for pleasure and the sensation that we feel. And if we spend time allowing ourselves the proper time we need for arousal and honoring of our bodies, then the orgasms and different things will come as part of that. But I think if we focus on that first, we just tunnel vision in on that and we miss out on the biggest potential that our bodies offer. So I'm not going to be speaking about orgasms and things in this in any detail. So I invite you to really see your body as one big erogenous zone with multiple mini erogenous zones. And it's like your body's this incredible erotic landscape. So many times when people self-pleasure, it's straight for the genitals. There's no connection to the rest of the body at all. And again, nothing wrong with that, but actually we're missing out on loads if we did that every time. It's like, how do we really learn to play this musical instrument? And it's a symptom of our culture. You know, it's like, get to the pleasure, get to it fast. You just have to look at the movies, you know, even movies, porn, there's no sense of building up arousal. It's just straight there and hard and fast and just gets harder and faster. And our bodies need something different a lot of the time. So, you know, sometimes hard and fast can be great. Sometimes rip your clothes off, it's great. But also other times it's about how do we really give our bodies the time that they need? And as women, our bodies need longer. That's the truth. So in terms of erogenous zones, there's a Taoist system where they say the body has, I think it's either 21 or 27 different erogenous zones. So they say we have our primary erogenous zones, so lips, nipples, clitoris, and places. And then we have our secondary erogenous zones and our tertiary erogenous zones. So I'll give you some examples. The earlobe. The left hand little finger, the side of the hand. And if you touch it, you might find on the left-hand side it feels different to the right. The nipples, or I mentioned the nipples, backs of the knees, the crease underneath the buttocks. And so we've got all these little hot spots in our body. And I'm not going to give you a list because actually people have come back to me and told me they've been having amazing pleasure on their ankles, which is not on the list, and it's totally surprised them. So I say go and discover them. But to really start, you know, with exploring really invite you to explore your whole body. And I feel that you might start doing that and it might feel boring at first actually, because it's not got the level of pleasure that you are used to if you already have a self-pleasure practice. But with patience, I really find that you can cultivate pleasure in your body. It's like these parts of us are lying dormant because they haven't had any attention. So with time and with practice, we can really cultivate pleasure in our bodies. So just giving your body time, and you can do this even in the shower. Have a shower, but spend, rather than a couple of minutes in the shower, have 3 or 4 minutes. And just when you wash yourself all over very sensually, in a very mindful way, where you're breathing and just being really present to what is and what you're feeling. And things like this can regularly sort of start to open, build sensation in the body. So your whole body is absolutely key. And also breasts. I think with women, breasts are often a bit of a pit stop that are on the way down, and they're not really focused on. The whole breast area can be really incredible and sensitive, again, if we give ourselves time. And I'm a real advocate of I teach breast massage practices. So I'm a real advocate of breast massage as a way not just about pleasure, but as well, it's got many, many other benefits, but that's for another conversation. So I want to spend a little bit of time talking about our genital anatomy for pleasure, because our genitals are an incredible place for pleasure, but what we tend to do is we tend to go straight for our genitals, straight for the clitoris, and ignore the rest of the genitals. And if we go internally, it's very much in, out, rather than spending time massaging and exploring. So for the purposes of this webinar, I'm going to refer to our genitals as our vulva, the external part, and the vagina, the internal part. And for me, I bring this into awareness because so many women feel that there's something up with their genitals, that they don't look right. We don't. I'm actually going to do a whole webinar just on this because there's so much to say about this, but I just want to really just pop it in today and to leave you with some food for thought and some useful things around this. One of the reasons I got into this work was I thought my genitals were really deformed and I was about to have labiaplasty. And when I realized that my genitals was normal, the relief was just incredible. And, we don't get to see other women's genitals in terms of the range that is, our genitals are as different as our faces, but we tend to get shown a very specific type through porn, where women tend to have more they tend to pick women with sort of tiny symmetrical lips. And for a lot of us, our lips are large, our lips are not symmetrical. And so, having a good relationship with your genitals, with your vulva, your vagina, is really key to your sexual happiness. And so, I totally believe that, unless you are having real pain there, and that may be something very different, would need looking at. Every woman's genitals is just absolutely fine. And so, there's some of the other stuff that I do is around helping women to really connect and love this area of their bodies, because it's incredibly healing. And also, our genitals aren't just about our pleasure. They're a source of our power. When we're connected to that part of our body, that's our roots. And it's where we can really cultivate pleasure, aliveness. It's the access to our womb space. It's such an important part of our whole being that often we're very disconnected from. So having a self-pleasure practice that really invites you to get to know this area of your body and to really tune in. There's a brilliant book actually called Pussy by Regina Tomhauser, which I recommend. Our genitals, for me, it's like if I wanted to make a decision, often my vagina will tell me, because she'll let me know whether she feels juicy about something or whether she contracts and it's a no. Literally, she's like a power source. So there's so much that we can do when we build our relationship up there. We also need to be aware of our pelvic floor. Again, this is another webinar. I teach something called the jade egg, which is an egg that's inserted into the vagina. And there's a series of exercises to strengthen and tone the pelvic floor and increase pleasure and sensitivity. And, the pelvic floor, that in our world at the moment, it's expected that women will have urinary incontinence and prolapses as they get older. It's just seen as the norm, and it's happening at younger and younger ages. So, for example, women are getting prolapses younger because of just sitting at computers and their bodies being slumped. And you know, I don't accept that as normal. That's not a normal state. And so having our looking after our pelvic floor and building up our strength is really important. If we have a weak pelvic floor, but also many women have an overly toned pelvic floor and a pelvic floor that's very tight, which can result in painful sex. You know, the health of our pelvic floor can really affect the quality of our sex life. And so it can affect our orgasms and everything. So it's really great to get to know your own pelvic floor and to know, is it tight, is it relaxed, is it weak, really just to feel around the pelvic floor. And again, this is another webinar, but I just want to give you just a little heads up that really to look after this area of your body, and you know, to really seek some, I will do a webinar on this. So I just want to show you a little diagram about our genital anatomy. So just bear with me 1 second while I just get this diagram up. And this is from a wonderful book called Women's Anatomy of Arousal by Sherry Winston. And they gave me permission to share these diagrams. And I'm just going to share this briefly because it's really, really important that we get to know what we have. And I just don't make any assumptions that we do know. So let me just share the screen. So I'm going to share the screen so you'll be able to see the diagram. So we'll start with Jenny. Can you just do me can you see that? Fine. Just so I know. Yeah, brilliant. So I'm just this is the external aspect of women's genitals. So we've got the clitoral hood, and the clitoris, and sometimes the hood covers the clitoris, other times it doesn't, other time it's mixed. We've got the inner lips, which are known as the labia minora, and the outer lips, which are covered by the hair, known as the labia majora. But actually the inner lips are often bigger for women than the outer lips. It's really important to know. I think the names are misleading, so I just prefer to call them the inner and outer lips. And they can range from women having inner lips at the size of a fingernail through to women that if they're standing up, that their lips are hanging down. They're also totally different. This is the really key diagram that I want to show you because, and I really recommend getting a mirror and having a look. So I will also just make a note to send you this diagram as well so you can see. So if you look at the, this is like a cross-section internally of a woman's genitals. You can see the clitoris has got a head and it's also got a shaft and legs. The clitoris is actually quite a big organ. And it frames the vaginal opening, and it's wrapped around these two bulbs called the vestibular bulbs, which are also, it's a set of erectile tissue, the vestibular bulb. So just like a man's penis will swell as he becomes erect, as the woman becomes aroused, the vestibular bulbs would swell as well. And if you go inside the vagina and press up, you've got the urethral sponge, so the G-spot area. And then if you go inside and down, you've got the perineal sponge. So the whole of the vaginal opening is surrounded by erectile tissue. So we tend to focus just on the clitoris and then sometimes the G-spot. But actually, we've got these other areas. And so, for example, if we're massaging the inner and outer lips, if we're massaging the whole of the vulvar area, we're going to be pressing on this erectile tissue and building arousal. So I'm just showing this to you briefly because it's just such an important diagram to show you that we've got all this erectile tissue. You don't need to know it, you don't need to remember the names, but what I invite you to remember is that the whole of the vaginal opening is surrounded by and framed by erectile tissue, so that there's so much that we can explore there. And so we can explore it from the outside of the vulva, but we can also explore it by putting our fingers inside and pressing up, down, or to the sides as well. So it's really great to massage inside, and that can really help to increase sensitivity as well. And then just to show you this diagram in terms of where everything sits. So you can see that the vaginal canal goes up to the womb, and at the bottom of the uterus we have the cervix, which is like the bottom third, and you may have heard of cervical orgasms, which women can experience, and you've got the urethral sponge wrapping round up to the bladder. So it's just good to know, have a view of where it all sits, because we often don't know, so I'll send you these diagrams. So just coming back to the full screen. Okay. So, so that's a little bit about our anatomy. And I would say don't get too hung up on what's where. What I really invite you to do is go and explore, and really explore with curiosity. And so bringing us on nicely to the concept of erotic yoga. So erotic yoga is a phrase that was coined by one of my teachers, Joseph Kramer, who talks about how, you know, he was really pioneering in encouraging people to masturbate and in different ways. You know, he's got t-shirts, change the way you masturbate, change your life. And and he says how it can really, you know, help us get out of our own habits and patterns, like I said. And he said conscious repetition is how humans learn sex. So the yoga model of education is really central. So with erotic yoga, the idea is that we have a self-pleasure session, and we just show up like we do for a yoga class, that we just commit to that time and we do it. And if you do yoga, you'll know, or any sort of practice, you know that there's times when you really want to go and you love it, or actually you can really want to go and have a disaster of a time, and there's times you drag yourself along and it's just amazing, or it's frustrating. So it's just about the showing up and committing to the practice that gets results. So I'll send you, so with this, the idea is that we have a beginning and an end time. So put the alarm clock on so that you can let go of time. And if you're somebody that's spending 5-10 minutes doing masturbation or self-pleasure at the moment, then start at 20 minutes. If you do 15 minutes, start at 30 minutes and give yourself a period of time. You're worth it. This is about your pleasure. Find somewhere that you can be private and not distracted. If you want to create a lovely space, sometimes it's really nice. It can be simple as lighting a candle, just to mark a transition from something different. I also invite you, I think it's really important to have some movement at the beginning. If you've had a busy day, you've been sat at a computer or running around, do 5 minutes of yoga before you self-pleasure. Stick a song on and dance, and just I do dancing, I do qigong, all sorts of different things. But that movement really helps our body to dispel tension, dispel the day, and we will have a different experience. And the key is to really and at the end of it, you know, you might have a few minutes in meditation or just stillness, a bit like a shavasana at the end of yoga, where you just lie there and enjoy the sensations and maybe reflect on what did I learn today, so that you're creating a container for you to learn and explore this aspect of your life. And what's really key is to approach it with curiosity and patience and compassion. You know, it takes time to learn, and it takes a lot longer to unlearn. And so often it can be about unlearning. If our body's used to just going for it and going for a goal, it's going to be suddenly like, oh, what is this about? It's going to take time. And then be really curious, you know, what does my body want today? This aspect of just tuning in. You know, if you go to a restaurant, you just spend a bit of time looking at the menu and going, what does my body want today? Oh, I'm feeling like I want salad, or I'm feeling like I want something warm. Actually, I'm feeling like I want something, I want some fish. Or so you're tuning in all the time. And yet when it comes to our pleasure, we just lie down sometimes and expect the same thing. So really tuning in is really, really important. And also to say that you don't have to be aroused to have an erotic yoga session. It's a real big myth that the standard way of desire is that that we expect that our desire should just be there. It should be spontaneous. And if it isn't, there's something wrong with us. And that's why so many people, especially women, present with low sexual desire, because they're just not having spontaneous sexual desire. Research shows, and it's not an area that's been hugely researched, the estimates are saying that significantly more men than women have spontaneous sexual desire. Yet we've pinned the sort of gold standard, if you like, that we should just experience lots of sexual desire, and if we don't, there's something wrong. For a lot of women and some men, but definitely for more women, it's not that we get desire and then we have arousal. It's the other way around. We need to feel some arousal for our desire to be activated. So we have what we call responsive sexual desire, that we need to have something to respond to. Then we feel our desire, and then we can get started. And so many women feel, because they haven't got spontaneous desire, they haven't got a sex drive, so they stop having any sexual intimacy with themselves or with another. But actually, when I give people erotic yoga to do as a homework and say you don't have to be aroused, people are often very surprised at what happens. Not always, but really, some people are really surprised. So I'd absolutely try it when you don't think, you're in the mood, and see what happens, see what you can cultivate. So let's look at the erotic toolkit. So I mentioned a little bit briefly about this before, is about warming up your sexual energy. So dancing, breast massage, I think Qigong, I love the jade egg practices, but it could be yoga. It could be anything that's going to help you get in your body, remove tension, help you to relax and get you feeling energized and vital. So whatever works for you, and that might be different at different times, but it's such an important step not to miss. Now, I just want to say a little bit about orgasm here, because I just want to say there's a difference between a climax and an orgasm. So a climax is like a peak of energy that is released and then drops. So it's, and whereas orgasm is such a more broader thing. We can just be hanging out in arousal and orgasmic energy. We can have little orgasms. We can have waves of orgasms. When we let go of how things should be or how we feel what we expect, then that's when the magic can happen. But that's sometimes easier said than done. So in our performance model of sex, we go for a peak orgasm. We want the energy to rise and rise and rise to be able to climax and bump down the other side. What I invite you to do, and as we do this, as that happens, we're building up tension, and then we just dispel the tension, and it's over very, very quickly, usually. And that's a sort of traditional trajectory of our sexual experience, and regardless of gender. So I invite you to consider what is known as relaxed arousal. And this is about allowing, when you're in your self-pleasure session, allowing the pleasure to ebb and flow. So it might rise with excitement, but then it will drop. It might rise with a bit of tension in the body, but then you breathe and let the body expand. So that your awareness is on the moment-to-moment arousal. You're just hanging out in the present moment. You're not trying to get anywhere. In doing that, you're able to notice the subtlety. This is what we're really wanting to access, it's the very subtle energy that's happening in the body all the time that we don't notice when we're pushing towards a peak climax. It's about just keep noticing, expanding, softening, opening, using some of the tools that I'm going to talk about in a moment. It's about pausing. It's about being in stillness and seeing what happens, and then increasing the energy and just, again, letting it rise and fall, rise and fall. And as we do this, what happens when we have a peak climax is that all the energy is focused on the genitals, because often we're just going fast at the clitoris. And then the energy just very quickly builds up in the genitals, and it's a bit like a balloon popping over in seconds. And with that, we're shallow breathing, body's contracted and everything. With the relaxed arousal, we're just breathing, expanding, opening. And it's like we can fill the whole body with pleasure rather than just getting trapped in the genital area, limited in the genital area. So with this, it's really important that you notice where you're holding tension in the body. Often people have a place where they commonly hold tension. And so common places are the jaw, the buttocks, the belly, the lower belly. And so if you're finding that you're clenching something, just to invite it just to release. So keep opening, relaxing, opening and relaxing. I still have to invite myself to notice, I still have to notice my tension patterns, doing this for over a decade, and they appear less and I get out of them quicker, but they're still there. So it's never going to be a case of they just disappear for most people. So it's about just noticing and then doing something different, noticing and doing something different. And key to this is the mind. If the mind is busy and distracted, we can't access the sensation and feeling in the body. So, it's about clearing the mind, and all these tools are really going to help. So the first really important tool is breath. And breath is the most important. Without the breath, the others will not, you will not get the fullness of the others without the breath. And I remember when I first started on my journey that people kept saying, oh, you've got to do the breath. And I'd be a bit like, oh, God, I breathe 24/7. How am I going to breathe any differently? I just didn't get it. And so I ignored it for a couple of years. And then when I started to engage with the breath, it was like, wow. And, so I noticed how shallowly I was breathing and how I was holding my breath a lot as well. And that's very common. And I do that not just in my sexual experiences, but in the daytime as well. We're not taught to breathe properly, and we end up trying to hold our bellies in to look slimmer, so we don't breathe fully. All sorts of, there's probably a webinar just on the breath alone. But what I invite you to do in the first instance is just to notice where you're maybe shallow breathing on, holding your breath, and I invite you just to take a deep breath. So the 3 breaths that we did at the beginning of this webinar is a great way just to start your self-pleasure practice, because you're already changing the physiology of your body just in taking a few deep breaths, because you'll not remember to do it all the way through. But the more you practice it, the more it will become second nature. And as you breathe, just feel, allowing yourself to breathe all the way down into the belly. And a good way to practice this is lying down. If you watch little kids running around, they're breathing and their belly expands when they inhale. So notice, are you breathing shallowly? Are you breathing? I was a reverse breather, so I was as I was breathing in, I was pulling my belly in, so I had to learn to breathe the other way around. So just noticing your breathing patterns is a great way to start to then invite something else in. Secondly, make sound. Sound is super, super important. And I totally get you may be somewhere where making sound is not possible. But even if you are somewhere where you can't make a lot of noise, just having your mouth more relaxed, even just going, that sort of little bit of noise helps our arousal to move through our bodies. If we're clenching our jaws, if we're holding our breath, we're not making sound. And sound is such a key part. Breath, sound, and movement are really key. Checking your jaw is relaxed as well. Moving your body. Often self-pleasure can become very rigid. Hold the breath, shallow breathe, don't make any sound, clench the body, stiff as anything. And it's like we're not gonna have a full sexual experience because we're limiting how the body can move. We're limiting everything. So by moving the body, relaxing the body really helps to allow the energy to flow. Change positions, get on all fours, stand up, all sorts of different things that you can do. And it's not about big movement. Sometimes it's in the micro movement. So it's just making sure maybe that your hips are moving and flowing. Just that in itself can really make a difference. So, it just might be little movements. Another key is to where are you focusing your attention? And so if you are somebody who uses fantasy or porn, I'd really invite every now and then that you come back to the body to notice what's happening in the body. Because if all our attention's up here, then we're missing what's happening in the body. So just going, indulging in a fantasy, and then taking a breath and moving back to the body and breathing and feeling what's happening, noticing what's happening, noticing just literally what's happening. Wow, I'm feeling hot here, I'm feeling a tingle there, I'm feeling tight here, I'm holding tension there. The more we become aware of what's happening, this is the more that we're going to be able to play the musical instrument in a whole range of different tunes. Listening to our body is the next key. I totally believe that we all have an innate erotic wisdom. I could teach you all the techniques and tools in the world, but actually the best thing to do is learn to really listen deep to what's happening in your body and to follow those impulses and to really trust those impulses. Our bodies just know what to do next, because we can get so into planning. I need to do this next if I'm going to have an orgasm, or to do that for my partner if I'm going to help them. But actually just by coming into our listening in our bodies and go, what does my body want? Just stillness for a moment. Okay, now I want to move. Now I want to turn around and do this. It's like our bodies, it's like learning a dance to free flow on the dance floor. And the more we just listen in and follow our bodies, sometimes in my bodies come up with some really quite creative, spontaneous things. That's where the play comes in that I would have never thought of in my head. And that's again where we can tap into the magic. So next is not to rush. To really enjoy the build-up of arousal. And I mentioned this briefly before. If the arousal's at a 2 or 3 out of 10 and it feels good, why rush it? And so one of my favorite words when it comes to this is savoring. So just savoring all the experiences, just at savoring and enjoying each moment. And so, arousing sensations may not be highly sexy or intense. They might be really subtle, but just allowing them, because the more we listen and allow them, the fuller and richer our experience. Just to emphasize slowing down, you know, if you think you're going slow, try going 50% slower and see what happens. Keep slowing down. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with fast, there isn't, but people rush their pleasure. And the more we slow down, you know, you may have heard of the slow sex movement, there's the more sort of tantric ways, but a lot we can experience when we slow down. So I just say try it. There's the concept of edging, where we build ourselves up to nearish an orgasm and arousal, but we don't go over the edge, but we just expand and relax. So it's not about edging from a tension-based way and stopping the body from orgasming with tension. It's about building it up and then expanding more, feeling more in the body, feeling more pleasure. So that can be a little something, a key we can play with. And just keep letting go into the body. It's like just keep breathing, keep expanding. We can explore toys. So there's all sorts of sex toys. There's jade eggs, there's crystal wands, all sorts of amazing things that can enhance your self-pleasure experience. Playing with different types of touch. Again, we can get quite linear. So we've got two hands, let's use them. That's going to have more of an effect on our experience. We can play with being both the giver and the receiver at the same time. You know, what's it like to give to your body? What's it like to feel your hands and feel receiving from your hands? What's it like to play with using just your fingers, your nails, your palms, the whole hand? What's it like to vary the speed, the pressure, the rhythm? So we've got so many variables that we can play with just through touch. So to get creative there. And then also a couple of final things is to focus on what is. This is really important. So often our attention's on, oh, I'm sure I'm not doing this right. I should have more sensation. I should be having more orgasms. I should be feeling more. And we're comparing to all sorts of standards that are often not actually true. They're snippets of information that we've gathered from things that are actually a lot of the time unreal and unrealistic. So one of the best things we can do is really listen to our body. The only person that can tell you really about your sexual experience is you, and really to trust what is happening in your own body, because if we start from there, we're going to create far better intimacy with partners than if we're trying to be something we're not, or trying to fit in a box or an expectation or a should. So by just really going, what's happening? Okay, that's feeling okay. And just by being with what's there, we can grow from there, rather than, you know, if we're telling ourselves what's not there and we're getting it wrong, or we're not perfect, or it isn't as good as what I saw in the movies, then we're telling ourselves what's not happening, and we're sort of negating our own experience, and we're not able to listen to the more subtle, beautiful energies when we're in our heads with that conversation. So I really invite you to just keep coming to the practice of focusing on what is. You know, it's a bit like the work of Byron Katie, if you've heard of it, loving what is. And it's a great practice for all of our lives. And then the other thing, finally, a tool, and again, this list isn't a definitive list, is to mix it up. You know, what do I not, you know, for example, to say to yourself in your self-pleasure practice, I'm going to self-pleasure today, and my goal is to make sure I don't do anything I normally do. So what would you do instead, for example? So that's another great thing to explore. And again, it keeps us more present, and it keeps us more open to new possibilities. So there's some of the toolkit. They're the key tools. And what I would say is, you know, if you have a self-pleasure session, just choose a couple off that list to play with. You wouldn't want to be doing all of them in one go. By choosing two, so you might say, okay, I'm going to explore some deep breathing and explore my whole body today. And to spend some time doing that, you might go back and then just have what you normally do towards the end. That's great. But you're bringing in something new every time. And the next time you might go, okay, I'm just going to try not rushing next time, and I'm going to try making some sound, or I'm going to play with the breath more. You know, all of these tools are practices that you can deepen with. It's about mastery. You know, if you want to go and play a musical instrument or dance tango, you will go and practice again and again. And with the breath, you know, I am still practicing exploring with the breath over a decade later. And there's so many different types of breath that you can do. So, you know, to really see these as a real toolkit. and that these are all amazing tools to bring in with partners as well. So the more I always say, it's, you know, if you can explore them on your own first, allow your body to get familiar with them, and then take them into your partner relationship. Or you might be in a relationship where you can say, come on, let's go and explore this list together, because all of these apply, and everything I'm sharing here absolutely applies to intimacy with partners as well. So I just want to mention a little bit about blocks and pitfalls with this. I think, you know, we can really hit resistance when we're doing stuff for ourselves. It can bring up, you know, we can have thoughts, we can have feelings of boredoms, we can feel like distractions, like there's many things to do. And I think, you know, this is about prioritizing our pleasure and saying yes to myself. Yes, I deserve this. Yes, I'm going to learn this and put this time aside. I think when it comes to sex, we don't have a culture of practice. It's like the myth is that we should all just show up in the bedroom and we all should know what to do. We should know what our partners want if we're with somebody else. And if we don't, there's something wrong with us. And so there's this sort of striving to be sexually perfect. And actually, we need to practice. You know, if a band shows up at the Manchester Evening News Arena, they've put hours of practice in to play that concert, yet we're expected to show up in the bedroom and know what to do every time. So having some time for practice as well, this is super important if you're with partners as well. It just creates some time to practice and explore. It just takes the pressure off having to get it right, and it helps build up better communication, all sorts of things. Again, a whole nother webinar. But I just want to say, you know, that if you've had, for example, trauma, or if you've been somebody who's had a lot of addictions in the past, things like disassociation, or what they call spectatoring, where you're watching your experience, and it's different than witnessing. It's different than witnessing in like a meditative sense. Spectatoring is like you're just separate from your body and you're just watching the experience from quite a disembodied place. Or you find it difficult to stay present, and this is very common. So if that's the case, all these tools will really help you: breath, sound, movement, and also sometimes by just talking through what's happening in the body can really help. So you might just be internally saying to yourself, wow, I'm feeling hot here, I feel my hands on my belly, and just talking ourselves into the experience can really help us to stay present and feel. And so, you know, really mindfulness is really key here. We're going to have times when we get distracted. We're going to have times when we can't stay present. But the choice is what we're going to do about it. And it may be that day, it's just actually you've just got a massive big thing to do with work and there's no way you're going to actually be able to stay present. You might just have to say, or there's something happening with the kids or whatever, you might have to call it a day. But there's other times when actually there's always a reason to be doing something else. And actually just by using mindfulness, using the breath, coming back to the body, you know, I think we so expect our sexual experiences to be busy all the time and doing stuff all the time that we feel that if our energy or our arousal drops, then that's it. But actually that's the reality. The real our energy does, our arousal does ebb and flow. So if we have a moment where it feels like we're not able to stay present, we're bored or whatever, if we take a breath, we move the body, we can often get back into the experience. And these are really good practices as well for when we're with partners too. So just a little bit on some of the blocks and the pitfalls, and you know, and so it's just good to become aware as well. What are your patterns? Do you have a common pattern that you go as your default one to zip off, you know, like I'm bored or I'm tired? And it's just good to really track that, because if it's showing up here, it will probably show up elsewhere. So we can learn a lot about our patterns and our habits in life through our self-pleasure practice. It's a really rich and fertile ground for learning. So I hope, so we've covered everything, and I hope that's given you lots of food for thought and some exciting stuff to take away, and that you've got some real enthusiasm to that. So what I'd like to do now is open up to questions, and it may be something you want to share, but also you might have questions about specific things that I've mentioned. So I'm going to hand it over to you, and so you can either the best thing to do is just send me a little message, and then if you want me to, let me know in the message if you've got a question I can just answer But if you want to speak your question, just send me a message and saying that you'd like me to unmute you, and I can unmute you. You can be unmuted with video on or video off. Either way is absolutely fine. So please fire any questions that you have for me. It might be if you want something clarifying, or you want something you want me to go deeper on something, or there's something that I haven't covered and you'd like me to talk about it, then please let me know. Great. So I've had a question: what are the best resources for fantasy? What do people use? So I'm guessing, is that in terms, if you could just clarify, is that in terms of, for example, do you mean sort of erotic stories, that sort of thing, creating fantasy? Yeah, fantastic. Okay. So there's a couple of websites of fantasy. There's one called Cliterati, which is like women's fantasies and stories. So that's a good one to check out, apparently. And there's more and more stuff online. If anyone's got any ideas as well, by the way, please do tell me if you've got any great fantasy websites that you are using. Please do share, and I can pass those on. But if you search female, like for example, feminist writers, female erotic writers, there's lots now online, and there's lots of websites as well where everyday people post their erotic stories and fantasies. There's also a book, which I think the Cliterati one is. There's also a book, an author called Nancy Friday, and she collected a lot of stories in the 70s and I think the 80s of everyday people's fantasies. And there's tons of different ones in there. So there's a few to be going with, but please come back to me if you need any more. And somebody else has said, it's really reassuring to hear what you said. How will we know about your next talks? Well, everyone that signed up to this webinar, I'll add you to my newsletter, and I only send out very relevant stuff. So I will, I'm going to be probably early October now putting out a schedule of free webinars, and so I will let everybody know. But also, if you've got any specific areas you want covering, please feel free to email me. You know, I'm always open to ideas. So thank you. I've also got a question. How can I cope with emotional release? I've been starting to explore self-pleasure, but feel very weepy as a result, and have almost shut down again because it feels overwhelming. Thank you. That's a really great question. So I guess I've got lots more questions, like do you have a sense of what's triggering that release? Do you have a sense of what the emotions are at the point of when they come up? Is it connected to a specific event or story or situation? Or is it just a general release of emotions? I would say, just answering it based on what you've shared, I mean, I would say, if you're feeling emotional, it is actually just to, if you can, just to go with it. Emotions can come up, and I think we can think that orgasms and self-pleasure and things have to look pretty or a certain way, but actually sometimes it is an amazing way to just clear energy that's in our system, and it may be tears that need expressing, and we don't need to know where they're coming from or why. And you know, many women say that they cry when they have orgasms, and it can be quite scary for them. They don't understand it, but actually all it is just energy moving. So it's really just to allow that to happen. And also, you know, again, exploring some of these tools, bringing some different things into the self-pleasure. You know, for example, moving the body before you start might be something that could help, for example. And sometimes self-pleasure might be that it just looks like a really lovely sensual massage. That's all that happens. Or it might be that you just snuggle up and you just need just some time. You might just need to have a nap, actually. Could be all sorts of different reasons. So I would say keep going with it. Try different inroads, and you can always message me a bit more information. Yeah, but also definitely look at what we've covered today and whether you can add some different things into it and see if that makes a difference. I've got another question on what toys would you recommend, if any? So it's a really individual thing with toys. You know, I personally like the Jade Egg to work with. You can work with the Jade Egg for health and your pelvic floor, but you can also work with it for pleasure. And there's some incredible like crystal toys and wands. You can get some that are shaped just for the G-spot as well, so that you can access different pleasure points and they can help open different pleasure points. There's many, many different types of vibrators. And, you know, people say, are vibrators good? Are they bad? All these different things. I don't think it's about good or bad. I think it's about if we are just using a vibrator as our route to arousal, it can become limiting, and then nothing quite matches that vibrator. So it's like I think it's really good to just mix it up and explore different things. And so, you know, I think let's take a look and see what's out there, and just things as well, like toys can be things like using oil. You know, how about having a self-pleasure session where you bring in lots of massage oil, for example, is another one. So there's lots of different toys to explore. And you know, I think there's some great sex shops now. There's some great ones that are very female friendly as well, that you can get a lot of advice. So, you know, there's a lot you can do to shop around and see what excites you. It's like, look at what excites you and follow that. Somebody else has said, I've always been a people pleaser, so struggle to now connect with myself. It's almost easier to perform for someone else than myself. So this is great question, great share. So this is where self-pleasure can come in, to be, how do I please myself? I would invite you to go to the self-pleasure practice with that question. What will please me? And then it's a great way to explore getting out of performance by listening to your own body, and to really, and it may be challenging at first, but it's a wonderful place to break that pattern. And to keep asking, what do I need? What do I need? As women, we're often socialized not to connect with our desires and not to follow our desires for lots of different reasons. And so for a lot of women, people pleasing becomes the predominant pattern, not just sexually, but often in all aspects of our lives. So self-pleasure is a great way to really do this. And I really invite you just to write a list of what it is that you would like. Get a pen and paper without any censorship, and just write I desire, and just see what comes out and write that. And just start to tune into what it is that you really want. And how you can start to create that for yourself in your life, and to start to give something for your, you know, give that time for yourself. It's a whole nother topic in itself. So I hope that gives you a little something to go with. So we've got lots of questions coming in, which is brilliant. And we've got a question on relaxed arousal. If we allow the feelings to ebb and flow and have a history of not having an orgasm or taking a long time to orgasm, if we stop ourselves having an orgasm, may we lose the moment and not have an orgasm? Can you discuss? Great question. Okay. So for many women, it takes 35 to 45 minutes to feel our full arousal. That's without even having an orgasm. Okay. That's how long it takes, and how many of us give ourselves that time. So I feel that, if you have a history of not having an orgasm or taking a long time to orgasm, first of all, taking a long time to orgasm is just the way some women are. And I think we try and want to change that, and we compare ourselves. I certainly did. And there's some women totally, you know, there's different scales. There's different scales with all genders, that some people arouse quicker than others, some people will arouse slower than others, and it doesn't make anything better or worse. So not to see it as a hierarchy, and if that's what your body needs, to really honor that, and to enjoy that, and it was such a relief for me when I found out that actually I just take longer and I'm not going to apologize for it, and that I could start working with what's true for my body rather than trying to fit it into somebody else's ideal or some myth. So if we allow the feelings to ebb and flow, actually what we're doing is we're allowing our body to feel more of our arousal in its natural way. So over time, we're building up, it's like we're building up those arousal muscles in our body because we're letting them do their natural thing. And so, yes, you may, but also don't be afraid. It's not about relaxed arousals. It's not about being so relaxed that we're just almost asleep. It's about being really lucid in our relaxation. It's about it's allowing excitement, it's allowing arousal, but not just contracting into it all the time. Because actually, if we tense and tense and tense, which is often what we learn in our performance model, we limit how much we can have an orgasm. And sometimes that can be the problem, which creates people not having orgasms. And by learning to relax and let go and surrender, then the orgasms can come through. So it's really about, see these as like tools that you've got. They're dials and switches that you can play with, and for you to explore that. So if the pleasure drops, what brings it back up again? And play with that dance. Just to play with that dance is what I would say, and just explore that and come back to me. Let me know how you get on. So I hope that gives you something good to go on with. Just to mention something about arousal non-concordance I've been reminded of, when it's sometimes that what's happening here and what's happening in our genitals can be two different things. So we can be lubricated and have lots of natural lubrication, but not actually feeling aroused in our minds, or we can be feeling very aroused in our minds and it's not actually happening in our bodies. So just to say, it doesn't always go in harmony, and I think that's worth mentioning, and that can be for all sorts of different reasons, and it's just good to be aware of, and that's something that can go into more another time. Next question. Can you speak some more about erotic yoga? Is erotic yoga effectively just self-love, or is it a wider yoga practice that is sensual in some way? Yeah, erotic yoga is just a phrase coined. So it's about self-love, but it's about self-pleasure. And actually, it can be bringing some of your yoga practice, but it's more bringing the discipline of yoga and the showing up for yourself at a regular time to your erotic life, than it being sort of a yoga practice. So I've developed erotic yoga classes where we get together and we do practices that help us to build our sexual energy and our relationship with our body. So in the Jade Egg work that I do, I teach things like breast massage and qigong practices that really help us to really engage our vitality and our arousal in our bodies. So some people, I've heard it called sensual yoga before. So it's just more about bringing our whole erotic selves to the experience. So erotic yoga is really what you want. It's basically, really, in essence, it's a self-pleasure practice, but it's opening up our self-practice to be beyond just having the goal of orgasm, to exploring our erotic selves and having a period of time to do that. And that might look very different each time. So it might be, okay, today I'm going to explore my whole body, or today I'm going to explore toys, today I'm going to explore looking in the mirror and seeing how my arousal looks in my genitals, today I'm going to explore a sensual massage for myself, today I'm going to explore this fantasy. So it could be all sorts of different things. Okay. Another question. I feel hypersensitive when touched sensually, sexually, and want to kick my legs. Have you come across this? Any insights into what's going on? So when you say hypersensitive, I don't know if you do you mean hypersensitive? Do you feel some ticklish hypersensitive, or it just feels too much? So obviously I'm answering this without having full details, but absolutely people can feel hypersensitive, and I'd be interested to sort of know if there's areas that you have that in more than others as well. So sometimes it can be to do with the fact that we're not relaxed, because the body sort of, it can be, we might be hypervigilant. It may be because we've had trauma or something in the past that our body finds it difficult to relax in sensual and sexual situations. If we're ticklish, and it can be sort of a form of contraction in the body, a form of like defense. It can be a protection thing as well. But often, really key with this is often around relaxation. And so, because if we feel that hypersensitivity, our response is to withdraw from it, like you say, totally want to kick your legs. So it would be interesting to fully answer, to know more about what's happening. It could be down to the relationship of the person who's doing it with you. If it's a specific person, there could be all sorts of different dynamics going on. But absolutely, I've heard of it before many times. And so it's really good to explore it. And so, say, for example, you're in a relationship and it's somebody that you feel safe with. It may be about exploring, for example, there's ways that you can practice something different. So it may be around taking some deep breaths. What happens then? It may be just having some time when you're touched and there's a pause so that you can relax into that situation. You may explore it, for example, in a massage dynamic where you are just receiving, and you can explore, what's it like if I do breathe? What's it like if I respond? If I try this way, if we pause, all those different things. So absolutely, there's lots you can do. And to fully answer that, I'd need to understand more about, what's going on. What are you thinking and feeling at that time is good information. Is it with the same person? Is it with different people? All of those things. Is it on certain parts of the body? But there's absolutely, it's like being a bit of a detective with it and understanding it, and then finding what are the ways. And sometimes we don't need to know exactly why it's happening. We might never know, but it's good to explore that. But then we can actually explore what are the possibilities going forward. How do we do something different in that situation that can open up a different possibility? So I hope that helps. So any more questions? So if there's no more questions, I'm just going to say a couple more little things that I think, just to wrap up, and I'm fine to stay on till 8:30 if anybody's got any more questions. So I just want to say that I'll be in touch. I'll put you on my mailing list, and I'll let you know if when I've got some more free webinars coming up. Please feel free to ping me an email to say how you found tonight. I'd really like to hear if it's been useful. A couple of people have already said that it's been great and have had to go, but please do let me know. I'll send you the toolkit summary. I've got it all written down in a PDF for you, ready to send. So if it's not tonight, I'll send it in the morning. Just to let you know, what I'll do is I'll send you both an audio and a video link to the webinar, because some people just like to put it on their iPhones and listen to it again. That either way is available. And just to tell you about a couple of things that I've got coming up. So I've got my online course, which is 9-week online course called Ignite the Erotic. And it's 10 women, and we meet on Zoom like this for 8 weeks in total. We have a week's pause in the middle. And every week we have a week's teaching on a certain theme, and then we have for an hour, and then we have a tiny break, and then we have another hour where we do some group online coaching. And so it's the same 10 women every week, and we have a Facebook group and that supports us, and where we all share our homework. Each week you get homework and resources, and so self-pleasure is one of the things that we cover, but we go a lot deeper into different aspects of it. We look at desire, we look at self-love as a foundation for our erotic flourishing, we look at all our social messaging that we get, why we have challenges in this area, we look at what's possible, we look at our natural erotic blueprint, who we really are as sexual beings, all sorts of different things that we look at over the 9 weeks, and it is a wonderful course. So if you've enjoyed this and you've got a lot from this, this is just a small taste of what you're going to get in the 9 weeks. So I've got 3 places left of the 10. So if you're interested, I really feel love you to get in touch as soon as possible. I'm interviewing people because I really want to make sure people who are joining are really ready and committed. And also I want to make sure that if you're going to sign up, you're going to get a lot from it as well. But it's an amazing journey. The women that have done the course before have had some amazing experiences and transformations. It's the third time I'm going to be third time I'm running it. I absolutely love it. So if you're interested, let me know. And if you've got any questions at all, let me know. And I'm also running 2 Jade Egg weekends coming up. I've got one in Manchester in November. I'll send you the links to all of these. And I've got one in Lancaster in October. So the Jade Egg is a really amazing practice for women to help with our health, vitality, sexual energy, toning of our pelvic floor. And there's a whole suite of practices that go around the Jade Egg as well. So we spend 2 days exploring that. So it's a really rich and fabulous weekend, and it's really great. It's quite hard to learn the Jade Egg from a book. I've really tried, and it's really hard, I promise you. So what I've done is I've distilled all the best and the most basic, important, crucial foundational stuff into a weekend. So if you are feeling interested in that, then please let me know. So I've had some nice messages just saying thank you, really great webinar, thank you everyone. Someone saying going to have a practice tonight if I can summon up the energy. Wonderful. And thank you for the great shares. So thank you for the great questions, and it's been really lovely to have you join us. I'm really thank you for giving up your evening, and I really hope this has been really useful for you. As you can see, I really love to share this this information and to just help us to really just find great ways forward with this area, because there's so much information out there, it can be overwhelming. And so I just really love to share what's worked in my life and what's worked with all my clients as well. So thank you so much, and really wishing you a wonderful evening. If you've got any feedback, let me know. And also if you have any questions at all following the webinar, please do get in touch. And if there's anything else you'd like to see me do as a webinar, do let me know as well. But other than that, I wish you a wonderful evening, and I'll be in touch. All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining me. And until next time, goodbye. Bye.